The human mind is not ready-made, nor is it naturally sharp, balanced, or resilient. It is raw metal, untouched, unshaped, and easily influenced by whatever environment it is placed in. In its natural state, it may reflect some light, but it lacks form, function, and direction. Just as a blade is not born a blade but becomes one through relentless refinement, the mind too must pass through a process before it becomes worthy of being called a weapon of light. This transformation does not occur through inspiration alone. It cannot be achieved by listening to teachings or reading wisdom. Inspiration is the spark, but the spark alone cannot shape steel. The forge is where the real work begins, and in the case of the mind, the forge is the space of stillness, repetition, and self-observation. Self-observation. In that space, something is being heated, something is being pressed, something is being tested, but fire alone is not enough. It is discipline that determines how long the metal remains in the fire, how often it is hammered, and how accurately it is shaped. Discipline is not punishment. It is not control. It is the willingness to submit to a process that is greater than comfort. It is saying yes to the repetition of practice, even when there is no applause, no visible reward, no outside validation. Without discipline, the mind flickers like a candle in the wind, sensitive to mood, fatigue, emotion, and distraction. With discipline, the mind becomes like a beam, stable, directed, unwavering. When this beam is passed again and again through the fire of awareness, intention, and effort, it begins to take the form of something solid and sharp. Not aggressive, not dangerous, but precise. Just like a sword, its value is not in its aggression, but in its accuracy. The forge does not ask questions. It simply demands presence. Every day, whether the external world is calm or chaotic, the forge calls for its ritual. The discipline is the same, rising early, moving the body, focusing the breath, directing attention inward, observing without judgment, training the ability to choose thought instead of being chosen by it. Each act is a hammer strike. Each moment of silence is a deepening of the heat. Each choice to return to practice, even when the mind resists, is the folding of steel upon itself, strengthening the blade, aligning the edge. One who understands the mind as a forge no longer flees from discomfort. Heat becomes a teacher. Struggle becomes part of the rhythm. Instead of chasing ease, one leans into effort, not to impress, not to dominate, but to evolve. In time, the raw metal of the mind, once chaotic and unformed, begins to shine. Not with brilliance for show, but with the quiet gleam of discipline-formed clarity. The world will offer many ways to avoid the forge. Comfort, distraction, the illusion of freedom through avoidance. But only those who stay in the fire long enough begin to see what the mind can truly become when it is no longer ruled by impulse, but forged by purpose. Anger is loud. It moves quickly. It rushes forward with force, seeking to burn, to strike, to dominate. It tells us that we are powerful because we feel heat in the chest, tightness in the jaw, energy in the fists. But that heat is unstable. That power is often misplaced. Anger is a fire without aim. It consumes what is near, often those we love, often ourselves. It strikes indiscriminately, and when it fades, it leaves behind only ash. Clarity is different. It is quiet. It moves without needing to announce it. Where anger crashes like thunder, clarity slices through like a blade through silk. Anger wants to act first, speak first, win first. Clarity waits. It watches. It understands the terrain before it moves. It sees not just the surface of the situation, but its roots. While anger blames, clarity observes. While anger assumes, clarity inquires. And while anger often leads to regret, clarity leads to understanding. To cultivate clarity requires patience. It cannot be summoned in a hurry, nor does it thrive in chaos. Clarity is a discipline of awareness. It begins with breath, with the act of returning to the present moment again and again until the noise of emotional reactivity softens. In that space, the mind begins to see not just what is happening, but why it is happening. Not just who is to blame, but what patterns are unfolding. Not just what someone said, but what truth exists beneath the words. There are those who think anger gives strength. It does, but it is strength without control. A sword swung wildly can hurt an enemy, but it can also injure the one who wields it. Clarity, by contrast, is precision. It does not waste motion. It cuts only what must be cut. It does not need to shout because its presence speaks for itself. A person who moves from clarity holds power that cannot be provoked easily. They are not numb, but they are unmoved by the bait of emotion. Their stillness is not passivity. It is calculation. It is readiness. It is depth. In moments of confrontation, clarity allows for choice. Leaves no room for options. It locks the body and mind into reaction. Clarity opens space. It offers a breath between stimulus and response. It does not deny emotion, but it does not submit to it. In this space, one can respond rather than retaliate, can discern rather than react, can remain grounded even when storms rise. This is where true power lives. Clarity does not need to be explained. It can be felt by others without words. When someone stands in clarity, their presence alters the energy of the space. They don't escalate, they de-escalate by simply seeing things as they are. That gaze, the gaze that sees truth without flinching, has more impact than shouting ever could. It holds a mirror to illusion. It disarms aggression not with resistance, but with unwavering presence. It is not interested in being right, it is committed to what is real. Power is what many seek first. It looks impressive, it feels unstoppable, it fills the room, the body, the voice. But power without direction is just pressure. It overwhelms rather than transforms. It burns out rather than illuminates. Like a floodlight in a dark room, raw power makes everything visible but leaves nothing clearly defined. It is in precision, not brute strength, that light becomes most effective. It is not how bright the light is. It is how focused it is that determines its impact. A laser is made of light, but it can cut through steel, not because it is the brightest light, but because it is aligned. Every particle traveling in the same direction. No scattering, no noise, just one line. Precision is what transforms ordinary energy into a tool, into a weapon, into a healing force. Precision is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is intentional. It asks over and over again, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? What does this moment require? The mind, like light, has energy moving through it constantly. Thoughts, emotions, memories, fears, all swirling, bumping, tangling. To live without direction is to let that light scatter. You are always busy, always thinking, always responding, but rarely cutting through. Clarity comes when attention is refined. When one thing is chosen, when energy is gathered and aimed, then the mind begins to sharpen. Then the light begins to reveal, to penetrate, to transform. Precision is not rushed, it is not random, it is rooted in awareness. It sees what needs to be done and does only that. No more, no less. When a surgeon makes an incision, the movement is small, but the result is deep. When a monk places a single word in meditation, the silence around it grows vast. This is how light behaves when it is not wasted, when it is not trying to impress but to illuminate exactly what must be seen. In speech, precision is knowing when to speak and when silence carries more weight. In action, it is knowing what step is needed rather than moving in all directions. In thought, it is the willingness to stay with one question rather than chase 100 answers. This is not a rigid stillness. It is the movement of one who has stopped leaking energy, the archer who breathes once before drawing, the craftsman who measures twice before cutting. The warrior who watches longer than he strikes. Many mistake constant movement for growth, but light that moves without direction merely fades into background noise. True light is felt when it is aimed with purpose. It does not need to be big, bold, or loud. Its power lies in its subtlety, in the way it lands exactly where it is needed. Precision makes the difference between brightness and brilliance, between distraction and discipline, between chaos and clarity. It requires less force and more awareness, less wanting and more seeing. It is not a matter of how much energy you have, but how well you guide it through thought, word, and action. A blade left unattended dulls. Even the strongest steel loses its edge through time, friction, and neglect. The same is true of the mind. No matter how sharp it once was, without maintenance, without presence, it becomes blunt, slow to perceive, quick to react, unable to distinguish between truth and illusion. The edge of the mind is awareness, and it is only through awareness that refinement continues. Awareness is not knowledge. It is not accumulation. It is not filling the mind with more. It is the opposite. It is the art of returning again and again to this moment, to the breath, to the body, to the sensation of now. It is subtle. It requires nothing loud, nothing external. It does not shout, it listens. It does not grasp, it observes. And in that observation, the blade is honed not through effort alone, but through precision, repetition, and care. Most people live with a blade that has not been sharpened in years. They speak without thinking, react without pause, move without presence. There is speed, but no accuracy, emotion, but no clarity. Their mind strikes, but it does not cut, it crashes. And when it fails, they blame the world, unaware that the edge they wielded was never maintained. To sharpen the blade is to develop a relationship with stillness. It is to slow down enough to notice the flicker of thought before it becomes speech. It is to feel the emotion rise and still choose the response. It is to bring attention even to the smallest movements, the way the foot touches the ground, the way the hand lifts a cup, the way the eyes scan a room. These are not trivial moments, these are whetstones. Every act of mindfulness polishes the blade. Every breath taken with intention strengthens the core. Every distraction resisted is a refinement. This sharpening is not glamorous, it is repetitive. It requires humility. To return again and again to the same practice, knowing that mastery is not achieved by novelty, but by consistency. A swordsmith does not reinvent the forge each time. He repeats the process, trusting that what is invisible is being shaped. Likewise, awareness works quietly. It does not promise immediate results, but over time something changes. The reactions lessen, the decisions grow clearer. The gaze becomes more steady, the hand more stable. In this training, nothing is wasted. Even mistakes, when noticed with awareness, become opportunities. The dull moments, the clumsy choices, the slips of the tongue, they are not failures. They are signs of where the blade needs more attention. With awareness, there is no shame in error, only the invitation to return and refine. To observe not with judgment, but with interest. To study the self as one would study the edge of a blade, looking for the places where friction has worn it down, then taking the time to restore its sharpness. A sharp mind does not need to dominate. It does not need to rush. It sees what others miss. It hears what others ignore. It moves only when it must, and when it does, it moves with precision. Darkness in all its forms is often misunderstood. It is labeled as the problem, the adversary, the force to resist. Pain is feared. Loneliness is avoided. Uncertainty is suppressed. But what is not seen is that darkness is not sent to destroy. It is sent to reveal. The darkness exposes what comfort conceals. It brings forward the parts of the self that remain hidden when everything is going well. It strips away the illusion that control equals peace. In times of light, one can appear strong, balanced, even wise, but that strength has not been tested. It is unproven. It may only be a reflection of easy surroundings. In darkness, everything unsteady begins to shake. Patterns rise, thoughts intensify, emotions become louder. This is not punishment. This is the process of uncovering. The training ground does not care for appearances. It demands authenticity. It is not interested in how things look, but in how they are when no one is watching. There is a quiet honesty in darkness. It does not flatter. It does not allow for shortcuts. It forces the practitioner to see clearly what they carry inside. And in doing so, it offers something precious, the train where it matters most. When the noise of the outside world dims, the real work begins. Without distraction, the mind meets itself, and often what it sees first is discomfort, fear, anger, grief, doubt. These are not signs of failure. These are the raw materials. The warrior of light does not wait for ideal conditions. They enter the shadows willingly, knowing that growth does not bloom in constant sunshine. Muscles grow through resistance. Discipline emerges through friction. Peace is discovered not by avoiding struggle, but by sitting in the center of it and not fleeing. The darkness becomes the teacher. It reveals where the edge has dulled, where the foundation is cracked, where the ego still clings. To be trained in darkness is to walk without visible signs of progress. It is to build strength quietly, without applause, without clarity, sometimes even without hope. It is to stay with the breath when the thoughts scream to escape. It is to stay present with pain, not to fix it immediately, but to listen to it fully. It is to understand that what feels unbearable is often the fire through which the dull blade becomes sharp. Darkness teaches one to see in new ways. It trains the senses that light dulls. Intuition strengthens. Listening deepens. Movement becomes deliberate. Reaction slows. What once overwhelmed now becomes familiar. And with familiarity comes understanding. What is understood can no longer control. This is why darkness is sacred ground. It transforms fear into skill, emotion into insight, and suffering into structure. The mind conditioned in darkness carries a different quality. It no longer panics in uncertainty. It no longer breaks when challenged. It has been broken and rebuilt too many times to fear collapse. It walks calmly through places others avoid, not because it enjoys pain, but because it recognizes that what looks like the end is often the beginning of something real. A weapon held in haste is a danger to everyone, including the one who wields it. In the hands of the untrained, force becomes recklessness, but in the hands of the disciplined, power is restrained, silent, and precise. A true warrior does not seek conflict, does not chase victory, and does not rely on intimidation. A true warrior waits, watches, listen. The blade is not drawn to prove strength. It is drawn only when the moment demands it and never a second before. The modern mind is quick to react, eager to express, desperate to be seen. The warrior's mind is slower, not slower in ability, but slower in response. It takes its time not because it is unsure, but because it is anchored in something deeper than impulse. In a world where noise is constant and opinions are weapons, silence becomes an act of strength. Stillness becomes a form of power. To refrain is not weakness. It is wisdom. To draw the weapon, whether in speech, in action, or in thought, is to cross a threshold. Something changes when the blade is exposed. Energy shifts. Repercussions begin. The warrior understands this weight. Every decision carries consequence. Every move once made cannot be undone. Therefore, to act without clarity is to act without honor. To speak without truth is to speak without integrity. To move without purpose is to invite chaos. Purpose is not emotion. Purpose is not ego. Purpose is alignment. It comes from knowing who you are, what you serve, and why you stand where you do. It is born in silence, refined through practice, and tested in the moments where everything is uncertain. The true warrior trains not for the thrill of battle, but for the responsibility of choice. They do not prepare for war out of hatred, but from love for peace, for justice, for what must be protected. Discipline makes the difference between reaction and response. Without discipline, the sword is drawn at every insult, every discomfort, every imagined threat. But when the mind is trained, when the breath is steady, when the heart has been shaped by introspection, the blade becomes a last resort, not a first impulse. Restraint is not inaction. It is mastery. It is knowing that power held is often greater than power used. The warrior's presence alone can alter the course of events, because those who have seen what lies on the other side of conflict do not romanticize it. They do not provoke it. They understand the cost. They have carried the weight of necessary action and know how heavy it is. That is why they walk with calm, not because they are indifferent, but because they have already made the inner journey through fear, through ego, through desire, and emerged with only what is essential. The blade is not drawn to display its edge. It is not drawn to silence others or to dominate a space. It is drawn when all other paths have been walked, when the silence has spoken fully, when the moment arrives and it is unmistakably clear that the time for stillness has passed and the time for movement has come.